The night was heavy with rain, and the echo of thunder masked the sound of broken hearts inside the mansion. Evelyn stood motionless at the foot of the grand staircase, her trembling hands clutching the divorce papers Alexander had just tossed at her. His voice, once her comfort, now dripped with contempt. "Sign it, Evelyn." "I'm done pretending," he said, his eyes avoiding hers as his pregnant mistress, Liana, stood smugly behind him, her hand resting possessively over her swollen belly. Evelyn's chest tightened, but she refused to let a tear fall. "After everything we've built together? You're throwing it away for her?" "She's carrying my child," Alexander said coldly. "You never gave me that. I deserve a family." Her lips quivered, but her gaze turned steady. "And what if I told you I was already giving you one?" He froze for a split second, then scoffed, shaking his head. "Don't play games, Evelyn. You'd say anything now to stop me." Without another word, she placed the unsigned papers on the table, turned, and walked away. The thunder swallowed the sound of the door closing behind her, and with it, the last trace of the woman who had once been his peace. Days turned into weeks. The media buzzed with photos of Alexander and his radiant fiancée, Liana. They smiled for cameras, flaunted designer clothes, and posted dreamy captions about new beginnings. But behind the glamour, Alexander's empire was quietly cracking, deals slipping, investors withdrawing. Evelyn had disappeared without a trace, and with her, so had the invisible lifelines that had always kept his empire afloat. Because what Alexander never knew was that Evelyn wasn't just his wife, she was also the silent investor behind his company, the unseen force funding his success through a network of shell corporations her family owned. The granddaughter of the late industrialist Victor Lancaster, Evelyn had inherited a fortune but kept it hidden, craving a love that wasn't bought or influenced by wealth. Now, as she stared out the window of her private jet, her hand caressing the gentle swell of her belly, Evelyn whispered softly, "You chose her, Alexander. Now, I'll choose myself." She landed in Geneva, where her family's multinational company awaited her leadership. The world had always known her as Evelyn Hayes, a fashion designer with quiet elegance, but in truth, she was Evelyn Lancaster Hayes, heiress to $1 billion legacy. The boardroom buzzed as she entered, graceful, poised, and reborn. Meanwhile, back home, Alexander's world began to collapse. Liana, once so gentle and adoring, had become unpredictable. She demanded luxury, complained of boredom, and flaunted her pregnancy like a trophy. But when Alexander's accounts began freezing, her affection faded as quickly as it had come. One morning, as he entered his office, his secretary's pale face greeted him. "Sir, the Lancaster Group has withdrawn all partnership contracts. Effective immediately." Alexander's pen dropped. "The Lancaster Group?" He frowned. "What does that have to do with?" And then it hit him. Evelyn. His wife, his ex-wife now, had ties to that empire. But he had never made the connection, until that moment. He tried to reach her, calls, emails, letters, but she was gone. The woman he'd discarded had vanished into a world too far beyond his reach. Meanwhile, Evelyn's child grew, her heart healing with every kick, every heartbeat. She didn't hate Alexander, she pitied him. Because she knew that when you trade loyalty for lust, you end up alone, no matter how loud the applause is. But fate wasn't done weaving their paths together. Months later, at a global business summit in Dubai, Alexander arrived desperate to save his dying company. His investors had abandoned him, and his reputation was in shambles. But then, across the crowded ballroom, his gaze caught something, or rather, someone. Evelyn. She stood in a sleek white gown, confidence radiating like light. Her beauty was no longer fragile, it was powerful. And beside her, a man in a tailored suit spoke softly, protectively. Alexander's breath hitched. His world stilled. The woman he had driven away was now the most powerful figure in the room. And in her eyes, he saw no hatred, only calm detachment, the kind that comes from finally knowing one's worth. He took a step forward, heart pounding, words dying on his tongue as Evelyn turned toward him. But before he could speak, the host's voice boomed over the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our keynote speaker and new global chairwoman of the Lancaster Group, Mrs. Evelyn Lancaster Hayes." The applause thundered. Cameras flashed. And Alexander realized, too late, that the wife he had once deemed replaceable was the very empire he had spent his life chasing. The night ended with whispers and envy, but Alexander lingered by the glass doors, watching Evelyn disappear into her convoy of black cars, her diamond ring catching the city lights. This time, she didn't look back. But fate, cruel and poetic, had more in store, because as the world crowned her queen, destiny would soon drag him back into her orbit, in the most unexpected way imaginable. The days that followed the summit felt like fragments of a dream Alexander couldn't wake from. Everywhere he turned, business magazines, financial news channels, social media, Evelyn's name blazed like wildfire. Evelyn Lancaster Hayes, the billionaire heiress, returns to reclaim her empire, each headline sliced deeper than the last. He sat in his dimly lit office, the air thick with regret and bourbon. Once, he had been the man the world admired, the genius CEO, the visionary husband with a perfect life. Now, he was the scandal, the fool who traded a diamond for dust. Liana had left weeks ago, taking what remained of his dignity and a large slice of his assets. He didn't even fight it. The child she carried turned out not to be his. The irony was suffocating. He stared at the newspaper spread across his desk, Evelyn's photo printed in glossy perfection, her hand resting on her slight baby bump, her face glowing with serene power. The headline read, Asterisk, the secret billionaire mother-to-be who outsmarted the corporate world. Asterisk. He traced her face with his gaze, every line and curve carved into his memory. He remembered how she used to fall asleep on the couch beside him, the faint scent of jasmine clinging to her hair. The same hair now styled elegantly, the same lips that once whispered love now speaking to millions about leadership, independence, and legacy. "Sir," his assistant's voice cracked through the silence, "there's a call for you, from Lancaster headquarters." His pulse quickened. He straightened, adjusting his tie out of old reflex, though his hands trembled slightly. "Put it through," he said, his voice almost a whisper. A moment of static, then a cool, composed female voice, familiar, but different. "Mr. Drake," Evelyn's tone was calm, layered with quiet power. "I believe we have some unfinished business." He swallowed hard. "Evelyn. I'll be in London for the next 2 weeks," she continued, ignoring the tremor in his voice. "The Lancaster Group has acquired majority shares in your company. We'll need to discuss restructuring." "Restructuring?" he repeated, almost in disbelief. "Yes. Effective immediately, you'll be reporting directly to me." The line clicked dead before he could respond. For a long while, he just sat there, stunned, the phone still pressed to his ear. Evelyn hadn't just walked away, she had come back for everything. And she wasn't here for revenge, not yet. Days later, London felt colder than ever. The meeting room on the top floor of the Lancaster Tower was all glass and marble, reflecting the city's grey sky. When Evelyn walked in, silence fell. Her presence commanded attention, no longer the quiet, loving wife, but a woman who'd rebuilt herself into an empire. She wore a fitted navy suit, her diamond earrings glinting softly under the chandelier. Her belly had grown just enough to be noticeable, a gentle reminder of the life she carried. Every man in the room stood as she entered. Alexander's throat tightened. "Mr. Drake," she said, taking her seat at the head of the long glass table. "Let's begin." Her tone was professional, detached, but her eyes met his for a brief second, calm, unreadable. The meeting stretched for hours. She spoke with precision, dissecting every flaw in his company's structure, every oversight, every weakness he had ignored. Each word was a quiet blade, cutting him down not with rage but with intellect. By the end, the boardroom was silent except for the hum of the city outside. She rose, collected her papers, and turned to leave. "Evelyn," he started, his voice low. She paused but didn't turn around. "You don't have to do this," he said, taking a hesitant step forward. "You've already won." A small smile touched her lips. "This isn't about winning, Alexander. It's about rebuilding what you destroyed." Her heels clicked softly against the marble as she walked away, leaving him standing in the ruins of his pride. That night, Alexander found himself parked outside the Lancaster London Hotel. He sat in his car, watching the golden lights spill from her suite's balcony. He didn't know why he came. Maybe guilt. Maybe longing. Maybe both. From his seat, he saw a shadow move behind the curtain, a silhouette he knew too well. For a moment, he imagined her looking out, seeing him there. But she didn't. The curtain closed. Inside the suite, Evelyn sat on the edge of her bed, hand on her belly. The baby's gentle kick made her smile faintly. "You'll never know pain like I did," she whispered softly. "You'll know strength. You'll know love. The right kind." Her phone buzzed. A message from her mother, "Proud of you, darling. Your father would be too." She sighed, staring at the city lights. "Would he, though?" she murmured. "Would he still be proud if he knew I still think of him?" Across the city, Alexander wandered the empty streets, the drizzle dampening his coat. Every building, every corner seemed to whisper her name. He didn't deserve forgiveness, he knew that, but some part of him still longed for it. He had lost everything, his wealth, his image, his family, but what haunted him most wasn't the loss of power. It was the loss of her smile, the warmth that used to turn their house into a home. The next morning, as Evelyn stepped out of her hotel, reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed, voices shouted questions about her pregnancy and her business. She smiled gracefully, answering a few before her security ushered her toward the car. That's when she saw him, standing by the entrance, rain dripping from his hair, a quiet desperation in his eyes. He didn't move closer. Didn't speak. He just watched her. And for a heartbeat, something flickered in her chest, an old ache she thought she'd buried. Their eyes met. The world around them blurred. Then her driver opened the door. She looked away, stepped inside, and the car pulled off. But for the first time in months, her heart didn't feel entirely at peace. That night, alone in her penthouse, she couldn't sleep. She walked to the balcony, wrapping a silk shawl around her shoulders. The city sparkled below. Somewhere out there, she knew he was watching the same sky. Her phone buzzed again, this time, a message from an unknown number. "Evelyn, I don't expect forgiveness. But please, meet me tomorrow. There's something you deserve to know. It's about the baby." Her heart stopped. She read the message again, her mind racing. The baby? What could he possibly mean? She hesitated, torn between curiosity and caution. But something deep inside her, a whisper of unfinished truth, compelled her. The next morning, she found herself standing at the old marina, where they had once spent countless summer evenings. The waves were calm, the air crisp with salt. She saw him waiting there, alone, wearing the same black coat he used to wrap around her shoulders when she was cold. He turned when she approached, his face weary, eyes hollow. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. She crossed her arms. "This better be important." "It is," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "It's about the night you left." Her jaw tightened. "That night doesn't matter anymore." "It does," he whispered. "Because that night, Liana lied." Evelyn frowned, unsure if she even wanted to hear the rest. But the pain in his voice held her there. "She was never pregnant, Evelyn," he said. "She faked it. She wanted your place. I was blind, and by the time I realized, you were gone." A silence thick enough to drown in fell between them. Evelyn's eyes glistened, not with love, but with disbelief, exhaustion, the weight of too many buried memories. Alexander took a step closer, his eyes desperate. You were the only woman who ever truly cared for me. And now, you're carrying my child, and I. She cut him off sharply. You don't get to say that. But her hand instinctively brushed against her stomach. He noticed. And for the first time in a long while, tears filled his eyes. Please, he whispered. Let me make this right. Let me. A voice interrupted from behind her. Mrs. Hayes, we need to leave, said her assistant, stepping forward. The press found us. Evelyn hesitated. The moment was fragile, trembling like a candle in the wind. She turned her gaze back to Alexander, who stood rooted, rain glistening on his lashes. I don't know if you can ever make anything right again, she said softly. But for our child's sake, I'll listen. Once. And with that, she turned toward her car, her heels echoing against the wet pavement, unaware that the storm she thought she'd survived was only just beginning. The rain fell harder as if the heavens themselves mourned what could have been. Evelyn sat in silence inside the car, the rhythmic hum of the engine echoing the confusion in her heart. Her reflection on the tinted glass looked like a stranger, poised, powerful, and yet, beneath it all, still haunted by the ghost of the man standing alone in the storm she had left behind. That night, she couldn't sleep. The words he'd spoken replayed in her mind, Liana lied. It explained so much, yet it changed nothing. Or maybe it changed everything. She walked to her baby's crib, her fingers brushing the soft blue blanket she had ordered just days ago. Her son kicked gently inside her womb, and she whispered, You deserve peace, little one, not the chaos your father created. But fate, as always, refused to stay quiet. A week later, Evelyn arrived at her company's London office for a press conference. She was unveiling a new global project, one that would provide education for underprivileged women worldwide. The hall was packed with journalists, lights, and cameras. She stood tall on the stage, elegance radiating from her every move. But just before she spoke, a familiar voice echoed through the room. Before you begin, I have something to say. The crowd turned. Alexander walked in, drenched from the rain outside, security hesitating but recognizing his face. Murmurs rippled across the audience. Evelyn's heart clenched, but she didn't flinch. He walked up to the stage, eyes never leaving hers. This woman, he said into the microphone, his voice steady, is the reason I ever had a name in the business world. And I destroyed her for it. The cameras flashed wildly. Evelyn's team moved forward, but she raised her hand, stopping them. Alexander continued, I was blinded by greed, by pride. I traded gold for gravel. I thought I was the king, but I was only ever the fool. Evelyn, I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't even deserve to stand here. But I need the world to know the truth. He turned to the audience. Every success I had was because of her. The company I built, the deals I made, she was my foundation. And when I tore her down, I destroyed myself. A hush fell over the room. Even Evelyn, who had promised herself she wouldn't feel anything, found her throat tightening. Alexander looked at her one last time. You once said real power isn't in wealth, it's in forgiveness. I'm not asking for yours. I'm asking for a chance to be a better man for the child we created. Gasps spread through the hall. The words hung heavy in the air. Evelyn froze, her breath caught. Security escorted him out quietly, but his voice lingered in the walls of her heart long after the doors closed. She finished her speech flawlessly, her tone unwavering, her composure perfect. But the moment she stepped off stage, tears she didn't know she still had spilled freely. In the days that followed, Alexander vanished from the public eye again. But this time, not into luxury or scandal. He was seen volunteering at shelters, selling his last assets to pay off debts, disappearing from the corporate circles that once worshipped him. Evelyn watched from afar, her feelings a storm she couldn't name. Part of her wanted to forget him forever. But another part, a quieter, more human part, remembered the man she fell in love with before the world poisoned him. Months passed. Then one morning, as the first snow of winter kissed the streets of Geneva, Evelyn gave birth to a baby boy. The nurses congratulated her, the room filled with warmth and the soft cries of new life. When they handed her the tiny bundle, she felt something crack open inside her. Love. Fierce, protective, unconditional. She named him Adrian. But as she looked into his innocent eyes, she saw Alexander's reflection in them, and with it, a promise she wasn't ready to break. She sent a letter through her assistant, unsigned but unmistakable. It simply read, *, your son is born. He will know you if you earn the right to stand before him. *. And so began a quiet transformation. Alexander devoted himself to redemption, not for fame, not for sympathy, but for something far deeper. He started a foundation for abandoned children, using the remnants of his wealth to build schools and homes. He worked in silence, letting action replace apology. Years went by. Evelyn built her empire higher, turning the Lancaster Group into a global legacy. Her son grew bright and curious, asking questions about the man in the old photographs she kept locked away. One day, when Adrian turned 5, Evelyn took him to a charity event in London. It was a collaboration between the Lancaster Foundation and a new organization, the Drake Initiative. She hadn't realized who stood behind it until she walked through the hall and saw him on the stage. Alexander. He looked different now, aged, calm, humble. His smile was softer, his eyes free of the arrogance they once carried. When he spotted her in the crowd, his words faltered for a moment. Then, slowly, his gaze dropped to the little boy standing beside her, his son, holding her hand, looking at him with innocent curiosity. After the ceremony, Alexander approached cautiously. Evelyn didn't move. Adrian clutched her skirt, peeking up at the stranger. Alexander knelt before the child, his eyes glistening. "Hi there," he said gently. I'm someone who made a lot of mistakes. But I'm trying to be better now." Adrian tilted his head, then smiled shyly. "Mommy says people who try deserve a chance." Evelyn's breath caught, her heart trembling. Alexander looked up at her, his voice barely a whisper. "May I?" For a long moment, she said nothing. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then she nodded faintly. Alexander reached out, his hand trembling as he touched his son's. The contact was brief, but it carried a lifetime of meaning. Tears streamed silently down his face, and even Evelyn couldn't stop her own. That night, when they stood outside the gala, snow drifting between them, Alexander finally spoke. "I lost everything chasing the world. But the truth is, I only ever wanted you. I just didn't know it until it was too late." Evelyn looked at him, her breath visible in the cold. "And what do you want now?" He smiled softly. "A chance to be worthy of the life I once destroyed. Even if it means watching it from afar." She studied him for a long time. There was sincerity in his eyes now, no lies, no charm, just remorse and hope. "Maybe," she said slowly, "some things aren't meant to be fixed. They're meant to be rewritten." He nodded, understanding. "Then let me help you write it, however you'll allow." She turned to leave, but paused, glancing back. "Adrian's school has a mentorship program. They need volunteers. You should apply." And just like that, she walked away, graceful, radiant, untouchable, but leaving behind a door slightly open. In the months that followed, Alexander became part of Adrian's world, not as a father, but as a guiding presence. They built birdhouses, read books, laughed together. Evelyn watched from a distance, her heart torn but healing. Then, one spring morning, as cherry blossoms painted the city pink, Adrian ran to her, beaming. Mom. Mr. Alex says we can build a treehouse this summer. Evelyn smiled faintly. Did he now? Her assistant entered the room moments later with a letter. It was from Alexander. Short, simple, sincere. Asterisk, I won't stop trying to be the man you once believed I could be. Not for you. But for him. Because he deserves the best of both of us. Asterisk. Evelyn folded the letter gently, her eyes glistening with unspoken emotion. She looked out the window where her son played, laughter echoing through the garden. And for the first time in years she whispered his name, not with pain, but with peace. Some loves don't end, they evolve. Some wounds don't fade, they bloom into wisdom. And some stories, like theirs, don't finish with goodbye. They linger, softly, endlessly, in the spaces between what was lost and what was finally found.